The professor saw no reason in Carl Graf's remarks not to accept them as truth, as he also found no reason in them not to take his stand and not to let Eduard's questions go unanswered. Interested in the boy, who asked such profound questions, he requested a photo from the teacher, in order to be able to make himself a mental picture of Eduard. Teacher Graf procured the photo and handed it over to the professor for examination, who made himself an exact mental image of little Eduard. He also told his little niece, Luz Stag, of the young Eduard, which was the real impetus for the fact that she became interested in extraterrestrials and their aircraft, and that she began to strive in the course of her life for all attainable photographic and written material, and became a world-renowned UFO researcher, who didn't let herself be easily deceived. In consequence of this, in the 60s, she got into a discussion with the Briton Timothy Good, who told her of a Swiss by the name of Eduard Meyer, who lived for some time in India and about whom the New Delhi newspaper, Statesman, reported as a contact man to extraterrestrials. Of course, Luz Stag tried to get in contact with Eduard, who in the meantime, in Persia, by an American woman named Judy Red, had become known as Billy, a name that would always remain with him, but she couldn't discover where he lived. But through a happy stroke of fate, it happened when she was staying with the American UFO expert and former Air Force Colonel Wendell Stevens, who already knew the Billy of whom she spoke, and he also gave her his whereabouts with the exact address information. Upon her return to Switzerland, she made an abrupt decision to make her way to Billy, with whom she then talked for a very long time, and she gained rock-solid insight that all details of the contact man, Billy, corresponded to the absolute truth and that there was no deception or lie. An insight that she also represented until the end of her days. Still, as a young lad, Billy got to know Professor Carl Gustav Jung personally. At the same time, the personal acquaintance came about through a happy stroke of fate, whereby the following happened. Together with his mother, Billy, at that time still Eduard, in the Matilda Escher home in Zurich, visited his sister Verena, who had been severely physically disabled since her birth and who had been staying there. From there, he set out on his short trip down to the psychiatric hospital, Burghley, where he still wanted to pick up an acquaintance, who visited her sick father there. As Eduard was waiting for the acquaintance in front of the main entrance, a man unexpectedly came to him and asked if he was, indeed, Eduard, the former student of Carl Graf. He had seen a picture of him that the teacher had shown to him, and as far as he could tell, not much had changed. He was Professor Jung, the friend of the teacher, the one who had always answered the difficult and unusual questions for him. This resulted in an intensive conversation between the two, which lasted for 46 minutes, and it was finished when the acquaintance, for whom Eduard had waited, stepped out of the main entrance. After the dismissal, Professor Jung and Eduard went their ways and never met again. Excerpt insertion, Brockhaus Lexicon, Jung, Carl Gustav, Swiss. Psychologist and psychiatrist, born in Kesswil, Kantonsgau, 7/26/1875, died in Kaisnacht, Canton, Zurich, 6/6/1961 from 1910. Professor in Zurich, came from the psychoanalysis of S. Freud, but then developed his own teachings, analytical psychology, of the psychological energy, of the individuation, of the individual and collective unconscious, of the archetype and the types of the consciousness, attitude, introversion, extraversion. J. Also dealt with occult phenomena and, among other things, worked on psychotherapy, religious and mythical research, ethnology, educational theory. Since 1948, the C. Q. J. Institute has existed in Zurich, and since 1957, the International Association for Analytical Psychology. Works, Transformations and Symbols of the Libido 1912 Extended. Symbols of Transformation 1952 Psychological Types 1921 The Relations Between the Ego and the Unconscious 1928 Psychology and Religion 1938 Essays on the Science of Mythology 1941 From the Roots of Consciousness 1954 Memories, Dreams, Reflections ed. 1962 Billy's Explanation, with the Unconscious, c. G. Jung identified the subconscious. January 30, 2004, 12:46 a.m. Dictated by Patha. Billy says, that I did not know. Now I understand a few things better. I could have imagined that myself. That was probably also the reason why he so encouraged me in the German language, and drilled me in such a way as also Svath did. Quetzal says, that is correct. If it wouldn't have been for Svath, then with certainty, you wouldn't have been able to read and write so well at the age of only 1/2 years. And if Teacher Graf also wouldn't have assisted you, then you could not have already composed those written works, which you wrote in your youngest years. Those were amazing little works. Billy says, thus, you know? Quetzal says, that is correct because Svath was also one of my teachers. And of course, he spoke with me regarding your person and tasked. He also presented your works to me, which he recorded constantly. And when I had studied these works, I decided to be assigned to your mission and a connection with you. Billy says, there, things come to light again. Interesting. Quetzal says, but it should remain there for today because you aren't supposed to be burdened too much. I still have just a brief explanation to deliver, with regard to what was presented, in reference to the incarnation, respectively the animation of the fetus by the spirit form, as revealed from the future review, the absurd and erroneous claim that from the moment of conception, respectively from conception to human life, the fetus would be a reason-gifted life form and, thus, an individual will recently be reaffirmed, maintained, and taught, again by an ignorant layman, with respect to the rebirth of the spirit form and its animation of the fetus. This new crazy teaching is again generated and developed by an erring religionist, namely by a certain cardinal layman, who will express himself in this way on the 10th of June, 1991. Billy says, thanks for the explanation. But Patha said that distance is supposed to be taken from predictions. Quetzal says, that is correct, but that has nothing to do with the predictions hastily agreed upon by us. And now, farewell, my friend. Billy says, you are suddenly in a hurry. Quetzal says, on the one hand, it's about your health, which is why I shouldn't strain you too much. But on the other hand, I still have to settle the tasks that I'm assigned to. Billy says, of course, I understand. Then until the next time. Until we meet again. Quetzal says, so be it. Farewell. The end.